Have you ever looked closely at a map of the ocean between India and Sri Lanka? There's this incredibly faint, almost perfectly straight line connecting the two. Honestly, it looks less like a natural reef and more like a deliberate brushstroke. And that brings us to a massive ancient mystery. Who, or what, actually built this 48-kilometer bridge?
I mean, think about that for a second. 48 kilometers. That is the sheer, jaw-dropping scale of this structure spanning the Palk Strait. To put that into perspective, you're looking at a distance longer than a standard marathon. That's a daunting distance to just run on land, let alone construct across open ocean. But what makes this stretch utterly captivating isn't just its immense size. It's actually the subject of two vastly different yet equally fascinating origin stories. One is rooted in ancient epic poetry, and the other is grounded firmly in modern geology.
So welcome to this explainer. Today, we are diving deep into Ram Setu, the convergence of myth and geology. We're going to unpack a site where ancient tradition and modern science spectacularly collide. Whether you know it as Ram Setu or Adam's Bridge, this incredible formation offers a totally unique window into how human history, faith, and the immense raw power of nature all intersect.
Here's how we're breaking it down today. First, the Bridge of Two Tales. 2, the Epic of Ramayana. 3, the geological evidence. 4, the mystery of floating stones. 5, the 1480 cyclone. And finally, 6, where science meets faith. Let's get right into it.
Starting with Section 1, the Bridge of Two Tales, an ancient mystery. Because before we can even look at how it got there, we really need to understand exactly what and where this structure is. Geographically speaking, Ram Setu is a 48-kilometer chain of limestone shoals, sandbanks, and coral reefs. It acts as a literal physical tether connecting India's Pamban Island directly over to Sri Lanka's Mannar Island. Now, visually, it actually breaks the surface of the ocean in several places, which creates a really shallow and frankly treacherous maritime environment. But more than just a navigational hazard, this exact chain of shoals sits perfectly at the crossroads of myth and science.
Which brings us to Section 2, the Epic of Ramayana, a divine narrative. Let's first look at the deeply revered cultural and religious explanation for how this massive bridge came to be.
The primary source for this narrative is the Ramayana, which is a foundational Hindu epic written by Maharishi Valmiki. The story is this incredibly rich, sprawling narrative. At its heart is Lord Rama, and he faces a monumental obstacle. He needs to cross the vast ocean to reach the island kingdom of Lanka to rescue his wife Sita, who has been abducted by the demon king Ravana. According to the text, Rama prays for guidance from Varuna, the deity of the ocean, and following Varuna's divine advice, Rama's army, known as the Vanara Sena, an army of monkeys and bears, begins the literally impossible task of constructing a causeway across the sea.
But the bridge wasn't just thrown together, right? It was engineered by two divine architects named Nal and Nil. According to tradition, they possessed the miraculous ability to make heavy stones float on water. And by using these floating stones, the Vanara Sena constructed the legendary causeway across the waves. To this day, devotees visiting Rameswaram strongly associate the naturally floating stones found in the area with this exact divine miracle. It's a beautifully powerful narrative of devotion overcoming impossible natural barriers. Now, let's flip the coin and look at Section 3, the geological evidence, a natural wonder. How do modern geologists and oceanographers explain this exact same structure?
Let's compare these two paradigms directly. On one side, we have the account from the Ramayana, a purposeful, divine construction built by the Vanara Sena using floating stones. On the flip side, we have the scientific consensus, a natural formation driven entirely by ocean currents and environmental forces. What is so fascinating to me here is that both sides are looking at the exact same geographical feature, but they're interpreting its origin through completely different historical and observational lenses.
The crucial point is how science actually classifies this bridge. Geologists label Ram Setu as a massive tombolo. If you're not familiar with the term, that's essentially a coastal formation of sandbars and coral reefs formed by longshore drift and ocean currents. This wasn't an overnight creation either. It was formed over thousands of years by powerful monsoon currents sweeping through the strait, along with the continuous rising and falling of sea levels. It's a real testament to the slow, relentless sculpting power of the ocean. To understand exactly when this sculpting happened, scientists turned to radiocarbon dating. Testing of the sandbanks and rocks in the area indicates an age range of anywhere from 7,000 to 18,000 years old. Now, this timeline is incredibly significant because it aligns perfectly with the end of the last ice age. As global ice caps melted and sea level shifted dramatically all over the globe, it created the exact environmental conditions needed for this massive tombolo to form. But here is where we get a massive geological plot twist. While the tombolo theory explains the sandbanks perfectly, NASA satellite observations and other geological studies have noted a pretty intriguing anomaly. The images reveal this unnatural alignment of boulders resting on top of a bed of older sand. The fact that the rocks on top seem to be younger than the sand they rest upon, well, that is highly unusual in typical geological stratification. And this specific age discrepancy is exactly what fuels an ongoing public and scientific debate about the possibility of human intervention augmenting a natural formation.
This brings us perfectly to Section 4, the mystery of floating stones. Why do they float? We mentioned earlier that devotees revere the floating rocks in Rameshwaram, but how does science explain rocks that can literally float?
It actually all comes down to basic physics and volcanology. The famous floating stones found near the bridge are scientifically identified as either volcanic pumice or highly specific fossilized corals. Let's use a simple analogy here. Imagine a heavy kitchen sponge or a thick sheet of bubble wrap. Because these volcanic rocks are highly porous, they are filled with millions of tiny trapped air bubbles that were created during their rapid cooling process. These air pockets give the rocks an incredibly low overall density. So while they might look like heavy, solid boulders, they're actually lighter than the water they displace, allowing them to just bob right on the surface. Pretty cool, right?
Let's transition over to Section 5, the 1480 cyclone, a shifting landscape. Because to truly understand Ram Setu, we really have to realize that what we see today is very different from what existed just a few centuries ago. If we look at the timeline of Ram Setu, a picture of really dramatic environmental shifts emerges. Starting 18,000 years ago, we have the initial Ice Age formations of the shoals. But historically, prior to the year 1480, cartographic evidence actually suggests Ram Setu wasn't a series of treacherous, submerged shoals at all. It was actually a continuous, shallow, and highly walkable landmass. People could quite literally travel on foot between India and Sri Lanka. But that all changed violently in 1480, when a massive cyclone and subsequent earthquakes ripped through the region, deepening the channel and leaving behind the broken chain of reefs we see today. Which brings us to our final point, Section 6, where science meets faith, a beautiful convergence. How do we reconcile the epic poetry of the Ramayana with the carbon dating of a tombolo formation? Well, there is a prevailing thought that Ram Setu is increasingly viewed as an intersection where geological formations meet ancient historical memory. And honestly, the beauty of this explainer is that these two ideas don't actually have to be mutually exclusive. For millions of believers, it stands as a profound monument of faith and a divine architectural marvel. For scientists, it is a spectacularly unique, ancient geographical feature that was highly conducive to early human exploration. The human memory of a walkable bridge likely survived through generations, eventually being immortalized in the soaring poetry of the epics. So, I want to leave you with this final thought to ponder. As you look at all the evidence, the ancient texts, the satellite imagery, the porous volcanic rocks, and the shifting sea levels, what do you see? Is Ram Setu purely a monument of faith? Is it strictly a unique geographical marvel of ocean currents? Or is it beautifully, inextricably both, a true convergence of our ancient memories and the ever-changing earth beneath our feet? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and as always, keep questioning the world around you.